Chapter 5 The Iron Bird. There was not a second to lose. Nancy seized the unconscious girl and rolled off the path with her. The log sped past, grazing Nancy's shoulder. Moments later, she heard it thud to the beach below and then splash into the water. As Nancy breathed a sigh of relief, her companion stirred and opened her eyes. "Cecily, are you all right?" Nancy asked anxiously. For a moment, the girl looked bewildered. Then she said, "Yes," and sat up. "I'm certainly thankful for that," Nancy exclaimed. The young detective rubbed her bruised shoulder and looked thoughtfully up the path. She wondered why the log had started rolling and remembered the twig she had heard crack. Had someone deliberately shoved the log down on them? No one was in sight, and right now there was no chance of her finding out the answer to her question. "Oh, Nancy, you've saved me twice," Cecily said weakly. "Please help me back to the cottage, and I'll tell you why I came here." The injured girl found it difficult to walk, but with Nancy's arm firmly supporting her, they slowly made their way through the woods. Dawn was breaking when the two girls reached the cottage. In the meantime, Bess and George had been awakened by the meowing cat and had become frantic over the missing girls. "What on earth happened?" Bess demanded. "You both look awful." The cousins were horrified upon hearing that Cecily had been knocked unconscious. "Of course, I'm not sure that it was a person who did it," Cecily said quickly. I just remember hearing a noise and—" Her voice trailed off. Bess, really realizing how exhausted the girl was, advised her not to talk any further. "You and Nancy sleep. When you wake up, I'll have breakfast all ready." Everyone agreed, and in minutes the foursome were sound asleep. It was after 9 o'clock when the girls sat down to the excellent meal Bess had prepared. Cecily said she felt fine, regardless of the bump on her head. After they had eaten, she smiled and said, "You all have been wonderful to me. I know I can trust you completely, so I'm going to tell you 2 big secrets of mine. The first one concerns an iron bird." Nancy, Bess, and George leaned forward eagerly. Cecily explained that her story dated back to the Civil War. Her father's family had been wealthy at that time and was reputed to have hidden a fortune just before hostilities started. "I don't know much about my great-grandfather, except that he was a Northerner and his first name was William. He and his wife were drowned trying to escape from New Orleans at the outbreak of the war. Their 3-year-old daughter, Amelia, was rescued and placed in an orphanage. An official there said the child had remembered only her first name and the fact that she used to live in a big pudding stone house on a lake. Also, Amelia was wearing on a chain around her neck half of a gold locket with a thin paper rolled under the picture rim. The paper had a message. Will, I hid your half of fortune. Directions in the Iron Bird. Your brother Simon." Cecily went on to say that as Amelia grew older, she tried without success to trace her background, as well as the fortune. Of course, lots of records in those days had been lost or destroyed. Later, Amelia married Robert Curtis. Their grandson was my father. Cecily looked wistful. "I can just barely remember Daddy telling Mother the story which Amelia had learned from the orphanage official. He had tried to find the fortune too, but no luck." Cecily explained that her own parents had died when she was 7. From then on, she had been under the guardianship of an elderly cousin of her mother's. Upon the cousin's death several years ago, Cecily had been left on her own. "At least," she said, "I still had my great-grandmother's half of the locket and made up my mind to find the fortune myself, if possible." "And you came here to search for the Iron Bird?" asked Nancy, greatly intrigued. "Yes, I studied loads of maps, trying to dig up some clue. Finally, I came upon a really old map and found the name Puddingstone Lake. I went on hunting and learned that Misty Lake here is the very same place. The name was changed." "How fascinating," Bess said. George added, "And you believe the Iron Bird may be connected with the stone house Amelia remembered? And that they're both in this vicinity?" Cecily nodded. "I have a strong hunch they are. The house on the bluff is all of stone and looks pretty old. So last night I decided to go out by myself and get a good close-up view of the place." She smiled ruefully, "But I didn't get very far." Cecily arose and went to her suitcase. From it, she brought out the half of a small heart-shaped locket and Simon's note. Nancy's mind was racing. She mentioned the other red-haired girl and asked Cecily if she had a relative who resembled her closely. "Maybe that girl we saw is hiding here because she's searching for the same thing you are." "I don't know anyone who looks like me," Cecily replied. "I have no close relatives, but I may have distant cousins whom I don't even know." Suddenly, Cecily changed the subject. "Now that I'm here and all these strange things are happening, I admit I'm afraid to be alone. Would it be possible for you girls to stay here and help me solve the mystery?" The three grinned and Nancy said, "I'd love to. How about you, Bess and George?" "I'm too intrigued to leave now," Bess answered, and George said, "I think, Cecily, that you and Nancy need a strong, athletic person around to help keep guard. Maybe I can fill the bill." "Wonderful," said Cecily. "And now I'd like to tell you my other secret." She explained that she was engaged to a young man named Nico Van Dyke. He's a pop singer and leads his own combo, which is called the Flying Dutchman. "Oh, I love their music," said Bess, exchanging glances with Nancy and George. Now they understood why the young man who had been with Cecily had seemed familiar. They had seen Nico's picture in newspapers and magazines. Cecily went on. "Nico is just starting to become famous, mostly because of his latest record. Polls show it to be a hit number, but the mystery is that his royalty payments don't match its popularity. Nico is suing the record company for withholding his rightful share of profit." "Well, I should think he would," George said indignantly. Cecily said that the company denied any dishonesty. "I feel that Nico and I shouldn't get married while the lawsuit is pending. He has little money, what with paying off loans he got for his college education and his music instruction. I have a job in New Orleans, but of course when I marry Nico, I'll want to travel with him, and at present we just can't afford it." "That's a shame," Bess remarked. Cecily nodded. "Perhaps it's foolish of me to be too hopeful, but I thought if I could only find that treasure, then everything would be fine and Nico and I could get married." "Where is he now?" Nancy asked. "In Baltimore. He asked me to meet him at the White Mill restaurant." Cecily's eyes filled with tears. "Then he begged me to go with him to Baltimore and get married. When I wouldn't, he became angry and blamed everything on the Iron Bird. I was dreadfully upset. I'd like to try to reach him on the phone. Will you drive me to town, please?" "Yes, indeed," Nancy replied. "If we're going to stay here, we'll need food supplies and fuel. Also, I'll have to call Dad and let him know where we are." After tidying the cottage, the girls set off. When they reached the lane that led to the village, Nancy stopped. "What say we take a few minutes and drive up to the stone house?" The others were eager to go, so she drove straight along the top of the bluff. As they neared their destination, Cecily suddenly cried out, "Look! That sign ahead!" End of chapter 5.